Hi, I am Manas, currently a fourth year student at IIT Jammu, majoring in chemical engineering and doing a minor in computer science. I have always had a passion for teaching, and so I offer myself as a perfect candidate for the role of faculty at FITCHI. Without further ado, we will be starting with the topic of vectors, which is actually a pretty important topic from the perspective of both JEE Mains and Advanced. Now, you might be wondering that why do I need to study about vectors? To give you an overview, the first thing that we learn when we actually enter class 11th is units and dimensions. There, we actually learn about that to study about the certain objects that we deal with on daily basis, we must have an understanding of the physical quantities associated with that objects. So, physical quantities. Please don't mind my writing as this is the first time that I'm using this setup. So, we know that we must have an understanding of physical quantities of those objects to study them. Now, these physical quantities that we deal with are generally of two types, which is nothing but scalar or it can be a vector. Now, what is a scalar quantity? A scalar quantity is nothing but a quantity which has a magnitude but no sense of direction. So, what do I mean by that? For example, consider the mass of this pen that I'm holding. Say the mass of this pen is 200 grams. Now, to define mass of this pen, I have given you the magnitude, which is nothing but 200, and the unit, which is grams. So, the magnitude and the unit gives me the complete information about the mass of this pen. This is the complete information in itself. I do not need to specify the direction. Okay, so it has a magnitude and no sense of direction, so it is a scalar quantity. Now, there are some quantities which actually require the direction to be specified in. So, to give the complete information regarding them, you need to specify the direction. For example, consider force. Now, while I am writing on this iPad, I am applying a certain force. Let's say I am applying 5 Newton. So, does it give me the complete information about the force that I am applying? Well, the answer is no. It does not give me the complete information because I can apply that force on any direction on this iPad, right? So, to have complete information about the force, I must associate this magnitude with some direction. So for writing, I have to apply the force in perpendicular direction of the screen. So I apply 5 Newton force perpendicular to the screen. Now, this gives me the complete information about the force that I am applying. So to determine force, we must have a magnitude, which is nothing but 5 Newton over here, and a direction, which is 90 degree to the screen. Now, these types of quantities which has magnitude and a sense of direction. Also, they must follow the laws of vector algebra. Well, you might be wondering that what are the laws of vector algebra. We will be studying that in the further lectures. So you can just have that in your mind that a vector has to follow the laws of vector algebra. Now, if a quantity has a magnitude, has a sense of direction associated with that magnitude, and follow laws of vector algebra is called a vector quantity. right? So now we know what is a vector quantity. Now there can be many examples in both of the categories. For example, the volume, density, temperature, or speed, or distance, and many more are there, etc. These are the examples of scalar, right? And what are the examples of vectors? The first example that comes to my mind is force, that I have already written. Another example can be velocity, displacement, and many more can be there, like acceleration is there, and many more examples are there. So we get a hold that both of the quantities are important, and we must have an understanding for both of them. Now, if both are important, so we are going to use them frequently, right? So to use them, I need to denote them while I study about certain objects, and while I measure the physical quantities, or use them while I calculate something. So how do I denote and represent vectors? So notation and representation of vectors. Now, to denote a vector, we actually write the symbol. For example, I am denoting a vector a. I write a and make a arrow over it, or I can simply write a and use a line over it, right? Generally we use a arrow over the symbol. So how do I denote a vector b? Like this. Now vector c, like this. So this is the vector notation. Now, I have told you that a vector has a magnitude and a direction. Now, to denote a magnitude of the vector, we use a modulus sign. Let's say I have to denote a magnitude of vector A. And how do I denote a vector A? Using this symbol. So, magnitude of vector A is denoted using modulus sign over the vector A. And similarly, magnitude of vector b can be denoted using this. And similarly, we can do this for any vector. Now, how do I represent a vector? So, a vector is generally represented using a line segment like this. So, a line segment has an initial point and a terminal point. Okay, so let's say this is O, the initial point is O and the terminal point is P. Okay, the arrow denotes the direction in which the vector is, and the length of OP actually denotes the magnitude. So this is the magnitude of vector OP, and the arrow denotes the direction of OP. Now OP is the vector where O is the initial point and P is the terminal point, and the modulus OP denotes the magnitude of OP. Okay, so we are done with the notation and representation of vectors. Now we move to the types of vectors that are there, and the first type that we will study is zero or null vector. Okay, so first type is zero or null vector. Now, what is a zero or null vector? Now, as the name suggests, it is a vector whose magnitude is zero. Okay, so any vector which has a magnitude equal to 0 is called a zero vector. Now, previously we have studied that a vector is represented using a line segment, say OP. Now, if OP is a zero vector over here, so its terminal point and initial point will coincide with each other. So it will look like a point only. Okay, so it has a magnitude of 0. But you might be wondering that what is its direction, because a vector has to have a direction. So its direction is arbitrary. That is, it is indeterminate. It cannot be determined. Okay, so a zero null vector is a vector which has a magnitude of 0 and its direction is arbitrary. It actually denotes a point in vector plane. Okay, now the second vector that we are going to study about is a unit vector. Now, what is a unit vector? As the name suggests, a unit vector is a vector whose magnitude is 1 or unity, right? So it has a magnitude of 1. Now, if I have to define a unit vector in the direction of a vector, say unit vector in the direction of vector A. So I denote it using A cap. Okay, this means unit vector in the direction of vector A. Now, how do I determine that? I determine that using the formula A cap is equals to vector A over modulus of A. So what I am doing is I am using vector A and dividing this by the modulus of A, which will give me its magnitude as 1, and I will get the direction of vector A. So what I will get is this. Say this is vector A. I will get a unit vector which has a magnitude of 1. So this will be 1 and its direction will be parallel to vector A. Okay, so this is about unit vector. I think that's my time. So thank you for your attention.